Welcome to everyone who has come to the ribbon cutting for Ways to Say Goodbye. I want to personally thank, and speaking on behalf of my sister Linda as well, thank the Jewish Federation and Frederick Meyer Gardens for their participation in this effort. This has been a long effort. It's taken about 3 years, and this is the culmination of those efforts, and we are very grateful to everyone who has appeared. The program will commence with Cantor Rachel Gottlieb Kelmowitz singing Hatikva and the Star-Spangled Banner.
If you are comfortable, please rise for the anthems. Kol od balevav pnima, nefesh Yehudi homiya, ulfatei mizrach kadima, ayin l'tzion Sophia, od lo Hatikvatenu, Hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liyotam chofshi be'atzenu, Eretz Tzion v'Yerushalayim, liyotam chofshi be'atzenu, Eretz Tzion v'Yerushalayim. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
At this time, I've been informed that the following relatives of Holocaust survivors are present. If I miss anyone, I apologize in advance. It is our understanding that relatives of David Mandel, Eve Ryder, Suzette Tabor, Leon Blum, Clara Zeidenworm, Joseph Stevens, and Fred and Margaret Sarney are here. If we could just take a moment to pause in their memory or their honor. Thank you. With us today are a number of dignitaries who have honored us by their presence. United States Senator Debbie Stabenow, Congressman Peter Meyer, Supreme Court Justice Elizabeth Welch, Mayor Rosalind Bliss. Certain members of the state legislature were supposed to be here, but unfortunately they're dealing with a budget issue, but I'll mention their names anyway. They all called me and apologized for not being able to make it. State Senator Winnie Brinks, State Representative Rachel Hood, State Representative David LeGrand, and Commissioner Melissa LeGrand, former Representative Brandon Dillon. But on the positive side, I just saw one of my oldest and really good friends, former State Representative Bill Bile is here. Thank you, Bill, for coming. Judge Christopher Yates, Judge David Sawyer, if I could just pause for a moment, he's the person that gave me my first job. My suite mate for many years, Judge Daniel Zamitis, somebody who on their own in their 20s went to Israel and lived on a kibbutz, Judge Kathleen Feeney, Judge David Murkowski, Grand Rapids Township Supervisor Michael DeVries, Grand Rapids Police Chief Eric Winstrom, and I want to mention just a couple special people. Bob Julian and his family are here today. He was like a son to my father, and we're just so happy that he's here at this time. John Clark, who worked for our family for 20 years, is also here as well. And I want to mention the Wiseman family. Sam Wiseman, their grandfather, was the reason why our father wound up in Grand Rapids back in the 1940s. So thank you to all of you for coming. At this time, David Hooker, the President and CEO of Frederick Meyer Gardens.
"991 days ago, Meyer Gardens and the Jewish Federation had its first meeting. I'm grateful to Nicole Katzman for reaching out to begin this important project. Our mutual friend, Elise Lintemuth, connected us. Nicole, where are you? There you are. Nicole, you are a great leader, and I am deeply appreciative of your hard work and your friendship. We gather today for many reasons. We celebrate and remember the life of Henry Pesca. I wish I had known him. He survived the unthinkable evil of the Holocaust, endured torture and depravity at the hands of the Nazis. Yet through heroic determination, he made his way to Grand Rapids and started a new life. He made great choices, worked hard, built a business, and made our community much, much better. He was also a family man. His son Steve and daughter Linda are living reminders of the enormity of good that comes from a life well lived. Steve and Linda are carrying on the tradition of making the world a better place. Thank you for bringing us ways to say goodbye, for bringing us together, for making this place to remember the 6 million Jews murdered. It is truly extraordinary. Thank you, thank you. Another gift was the leadership and wise guidance of Dan Hurwitz. Dan, you are a dear friend. Thank you. Curating art with a special purpose is a tough job. Jochen Weirich led our curatorial efforts to bring us together with Ariel Schlesinger. Sue Eberly brilliantly chairs our Sculpture Advisory Committee and was an enormous help articulating the importance of how contemporary art can help us deal with grief and loss. My dear friend Bill Padness right over here is also a member of that committee and was very instrumental in our work. Our sculpture team of Lorene, Steve, Caleb, Amy, Andy, and Bo worked with Ariel to design this beautiful space. A space that is highly visible, yet at the same time provides a space for people to gather, to reflect, to offer prayers, to meditate. Ariel's sculpture started with an idea of a fig tree in Italy. Today, it stands here in Meyer Gardens making a profound statement of remembrance, remembering the lives lost, celebrating those who overcame evil, and serving as an important symbol to those who deny the Holocaust. Ariel, you have a great gift. You use it well and work hard. We appreciate all you do and are thrilled we have this sculpture as part of our permanent collection. I so wish Fred and Lena Meyer were here and alive to see this important addition to the place they made possible. It is a certainty they would also celebrate this important moment. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is still a huge problem. On a trip to Vienna, my family witnessed Nazis holding a rally. We had just visited the Mauthausen concentration camp where we looked up the names of some of my wife's ancestors who were gassed to death. When we saw the Nazis, we were sickened. Here in our country, the Wall Street Journal reports that synagogues are having to devote 5% and more of their budgets for security. Unfortunately, there's still evil in the world. Ways to Say Goodbye serves as an inspiration that we must work to eradicate anti-Semitism and racism of all kinds. The victims of the Holocaust now make this hallowed ground. Let there be no more Holocausts. Thank you.
Next, David Alfonso, the board chair of the Jewish Federation of Grand Rapids.
Thank you very much, Steve. On behalf of the Jewish Federation of Grand Rapids, I would like to welcome all of you to this incredible event. For those of you who are not familiar with us, the Jewish Federation of Grand Rapids is a nonprofit organization that exists to serve the needs of the Jewish community here in Grand Rapids as well as throughout West Michigan. We do this based on three main pillars that serve as the foundation for our mission. Number one is philanthropy, helping to raise funds that benefit our community as well as Jewish communities and causes throughout the world. Number two is programming, enriching our community through cultural events and speakers. And number three, social services, providing a safety net for those people in need, as well as acting as a resource for our elderly community members. I'm incredibly proud to have been involved with this organization for the last 10 years. As I was preparing these remarks tonight, I was searching for a word that captures the multitude of emotions and feelings regarding arriving at this day. I decided on a word that many of you will be familiar with, while some of you probably have never heard it before. It is a Yiddish word, naches. Naches means to express pride about an accomplishment, and it is often used to describe parents bragging about the accomplishments of their children. Not surprising. It is derived from the Hebrew word nachat, as well as another Hebrew word lanuach, which means to rest or to have a feeling of being at ease after accomplishing a great deed or task. I can't think of a better word to describe where we've arrived to at this day. So how did we get to this day? As David alluded to, it began about 2 years ago when our executive director, Nicole Katzman, and Linda Pesca were having lunch and discussing ways in which Linda and her brother Steve could honor the legacy of their late father, Henry Pesca, as well as promote Holocaust education. One thing I learned very quickly was that when Linda and Nicole commit to an idea, good luck saying no. Over the course of the past 2 years, Nicole, as well as numerous board members and the Pesca family, have worked tirelessly with David Hooker and the staff here at the Sculpture Park to turn this dream into a reality. When we think of the deeper meaning of this piece of art, we can't help but focus on the Holocaust and how it has shaped our Jewish identity and existence. September of 1939 marked the beginning of World War II and the darkest chapter in the history of the Jewish people. The horrors and tragedy of the Holocaust still linger today in the form of anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, anti-Zionism, and the ever-dwindling number of survivors that remain with us. It is incumbent upon us, as well as the generations that will follow us, to tell their stories so that we may embody the saying, never again. We hope that this sculpture will serve as a beacon of light, a means of inspiration and education for future generations that will view it and carry on its message of hope and remembrance. In closing, I would like to thank all of you for joining us on this truly historic day for our community, the Pesca family, as well as the Jewish Federation. I think I can speak for all of us and say that we are filled with a great deal of naches on this incredible evening. Thank you.
The senior senator from the state of Michigan, Debbie Stabenow.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. What a beautiful evening, isn't it? It is just wonderful to be here. And thank you to Steve and to Linda for bringing us here. It is really an opportunity in the midst of a lot of things swirling around us to have a moment of beauty and peace and community and unity. And we could use that right now. And I know more people will feel this as they come to this beautiful, beautiful place as well. So I want to also thank Nicole Katzman with the Jewish Federation of Grand Rapids for joining with Linda and doing this, and David Hooker and everyone who is involved in putting this together, the Jewish Federation, all that has brought us to this point right now. It is really an honor to be here as a part of this dedication. You know, we remember the man it's honoring, Henry Pesca, a Holocaust survivor, as we know, who became a highly successful businessman, a beloved husband and father, and a long-standing pillar of this community. And remember all that he came through to get here. His children sure remember that and want us to remember that, and all of those who have gone through the Holocaust. This monument will stand forever as a reminder of Henry's courage and his determination to honor those who did not survive. Steve and Linda were entrusted to carry on Henry's legacy, and I know this memorial would make him so proud. Henry never forgot where he came from, what he'd been through, and neither can we. This sculpture and the website that accompanies it will stand as a reminder of the 6 million Jews who were murdered by the Nazis. And they will also stand as a reminder that we must forever guard against the hatred that endangers human lives, from vicious acts of anti-Semitism all around us, to racist acts of gun violence, to democracy under attack here as well as abroad. We must forever remain vigilant. Nobel Peace Prize laureate and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel once said this: "I belong to a generation that has learned that whatever the question, despair cannot be an answer. Whatever the experience, indifference is not an option." This sculpture stands a testament that the Pesca family and the entire Grand Rapids community are not indifferent and will always remember. And we must do the same. It's wonderful being here.
United States Representative Peter Meyer.
I'm very honored to be here at the first Holocaust Memorial at the Frederick Meyer Gardens. And I also recognize I'm double dipping on duties as both the representative for this area in Congress and also the only member of the Meyer family who is here today. So I will try to honor both my legacies as an elected official and as somebody who knows how much this would have meant to my grandfather. How much he would have cherished the partnership with the Jewish Federation of Grand Rapids and working together with the Pesca family, and how much he would have been so deeply appreciative to have a monument here at the Gardens when we have pathways filled with little areas where you can celebrate a joyous moment, a piece of contemplative reflection, a flight of fancy, to also be rooted in the past, but a past that's not living solely in the past, but lives with us today, and that the tragic consequence of which threatens to rear its ugly head all too often. You know, I'm only about 18 months into my term in Congress, and for anybody who's been paying passive attention to the news, it's been a little bit wild out there. But when you have strains on both sides of the aisle, this strain, this temptation of folks on the extremes to dip their toes into the rancid waters of anti-Semitism, and then you have indifferent shrugs from leaders who should know better. You know, the memorial behind us is a testament to why we need to not forget the ugly consequences of tolerating that type of bigotry, that type of discrimination, and the reality that words today will not necessarily just be words tomorrow. So I know the legacy that Henry left has been celebrated here, and the legacy is represented not only in the memorial behind me, but the family in front of me by the legacy that he left to the community as well. But I believe I met him close to, maybe actually over 20 years ago now, at his biography, or the biography of Joe Stevens, Good Morning, a fellow Holocaust survivor. And as we see that generation no longer with us, as that memory begins to fade, beginning to lock the reality of what happened when first-person testimonials become ever more rare. I was at Vad Yashem just in the spring, and being able to hear firsthand is something that future generations will have to rely on the recordings, will have to rely on the website that's created, will have to rely on those testimonials. So I'm deeply appreciative to be here today. I know my grandfather would be honored to see what was built. His bride Lena would love to see the crowd that's gathered here today. And I'm deeply honored to add one more fantastic monument to both the sorrows that preceded us and the hope that's in front of us here in West Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Next, Supreme Court Justice Elizabeth Welch. And let me just say this. When I left the bench, the first person that I wanted or thought about taking my place was Elizabeth Welch. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone, honored guests. It's really a privilege to be with you all today. It's especially a privilege because the Peskas are such longtime dear friends, and I did have the privilege of knowing Henry. Not well, he was further on in the years by the time I met him, but definitely ran into him more than once at Charlie's Crab. I come from, my family's a blended family. We are members of both Temple Emmanuel and Westminster Presbyterian. So I bring sort of an interesting perspective to today. 2 days ago, we lit the Yortzeit candle for my father-in-law on the one-year anniversary of his death. And I had to explain to my Christian-raised daughter what the candle was about. And she thought it was amazing. She was really, really interested in the tradition. And we were talking about the candle is a way to obviously honor and remember Steve in this case, but also that, you know, light gives us hope. And just like trees, right? They can be sorrowful and imposing, but they also show what it is to endure and continue going on and just putting one foot in front of another in the face of terrible despair. And obviously we know the life of Henry Peska had elements of both. He came to Grand Rapids, he made a life for himself. He indeed lived the American dream, but had a lot of sorrow and, you know, horror that's hard to fathom. And he kept moving forward. And he raised a beautiful family and has an amazing legacy that we see here today. And obviously, he's one of so many who did the same. And when Steve talked to me many months ago about this opportunity and told me to save the date more than once, and I did, but I also had the privilege, we get the Temple newsletter and the Federation newsletter, and I really enjoyed watching the journey of the artist and what went into all the planning, and it is just incredible to be standing here today underneath this incredible, beautiful sculpture memorial. And I actually came to Meyer Gardens. I was telling my husband as I walked in, my grandfather, who helped raise me and died a long time ago, but when the horse was brand new, he so wanted to come see the horse. And I came here with him to see the horse, just the two of us. And I have not been out there in ages, so we decided, Dan Hurwitz and my husband and I walked out here today, and we walked by the horse, and I just I cannot tell you the joy it brought me to walk out here, walk by the horse, take a left, and end up here. So I just am thrilled for everybody. Thank you for the invitation to be here, and so look forward to many years to come and the generations to come to remember. So thank you.
the mayor of the city of Grand Rapids, Rosalind Bliss.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everyone. I'm so unbelievably honored to be with you tonight as we come together to remember and reflect on the unbelievable atrocities of the Holocaust and the millions of victims. But more than that, we come together to lift up the power of the human spirit. We are here tonight to honor those innocent lives lost and those who survived, those who lived with the pain and the fear and the loss, and whose lives were forever shaped because of it. And one of those individuals being Henry Pesca, who settled right here in West Michigan. And I love that coupled with this amazing sculpture is access to a collection of stories about survivors of the Holocaust that has been put together by the Jewish Federation. And one of the first ones, if you have gone to the website, one of the first ones on the page is Henry Pesca. And it is a heart-wrenching and painful experience to read about his experiences. But it is also unbelievably heartwarming and inspiring to see the strength and the determination and the heart. And it really is a testament to the power of the human spirit and resilience and the ability to overcome adversity. And we are so grateful that he found his way to Grand Rapids and that he made Grand Rapids his home, as he has made a lasting impact on our community and every single life that he touched. And that legacy has been carried on and amplified by his children and his grandchildren. Thanks to the kindness of and generosity of the Pesca family and the Jewish Federation, we now have this amazing gathering place in our community. A place to remember, a place to reflect, a place for future generations to come and learn about the Holocaust, a place to hear and bear witness to the stories, a place to keep alive in the minds of our youth and, more importantly, future generations, what really happened during the Holocaust. And more importantly, to inspire people, to inspire the next generation and promote tolerance and love and understanding. And thinking about this moment, this season that we are all living through, I think it is more important than ever that we remain vigilant against efforts to rewrite our history. And it is also critically important that we are united in standing up against hate, against any groups, wherever they occur. So again, my heartfelt thanks to the Pesca family. I'm so grateful to know you. I'm so grateful for everything that you've done in our community. And thank you to the Jewish Federation for making today a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bliss. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Rob Franciosi. He has taught us more about what happened to our father during World War II than I think we ever knew before. And his efforts in terms of exploring the kind of history that the mayor and others have spoken about are so important and so vital. I just want him to know how much our family appreciates everything that he's done. The next speaker is George Selem, the Senior Vice President of the Anti-Defamation League. And let me just tell you, when we were a kid growing up, we got the ADL bulletin every month.
Thank you, Steve. I hope you still get them, and if you don't, we can remedy that today. We have lots of business cards. Thank you, Stephen, for that kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me and the team from the ADL to be here tonight. Like other speakers have done, I just want to take a moment to thank our friends and partners and colleagues in the effort to combat anti-Semitism from the Federation here in Grand Rapids. As it's been noted before, Nicole Katzman, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your insight into what this sculpture could mean, and really for inviting ADL to take part in this critical moment. And to the Meyer Organization, thank you, David Hooker. Thank you for noting the Wall Street Journal article and the incidents of anti-Semitism that are indeed on the rise nationally and have been for the past several years. To extend on your comments, David, anti-Semitism is indeed a scourge on our country, and incidents continue to rise. So it's important and imperative that good organizations here, like the Meyer Garden, are part of this fight. So it's not just the ADL, it's not just the Jewish Federation, but all parts of our society kind of take part in this effort to combat anti-Semitism today. Congressman Meyer, thank you for your remarks as well. It's great to see you. Thank you for your commitment to these efforts. And Senator Stabenow, also thank you for your commitment and to the work that you've both done to work with the ADL, Jewish Federations, and other organizations that are on the front lines of combating anti-Semitism, both here in Grand Rapids, across the state of Michigan, and across the country. And specifically to the Pesca family. Without your support, this could not have happened today. I, like Mayor Bliss, was on the website the other day. I was mentioning to Stephen, the story is one when we think about times where we have a bad day, a bad week, a bad month. When we look back at 2020 and we think about the start of the pandemic and we think, wow, I can't wait for this year to be over. When we think about the legacy that is represented here, we can think about and become inspired to overcome the most horrific kinds of adversity that one could ever imagine. And proceed forward to grow and prosper in a way that is truly, as the Senator noted, the American dream. This ceremony has been in planning for some time, and the ADL was thrilled to be in partnership, and we're grateful to be here today. You know, several constituents have reported incidents here in Grand Rapids of anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred and bigotry. And yes, I'm sorry to say that here in Grand Rapids and elsewhere across the country, hate is indeed on the rise. But let me assure you here of this. Your community is not insulated from anti-Semitism because no community is insulated from anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitic incidents in calendar year 2021 alone account to nearly 3,000, the highest record in the past nearly 4 decades that the ADL has been monitoring incidents of anti-Semitism. In Michigan alone, the count is just over 100 incidents alone of vandalism, bias, bigotry, against individuals who are perceived to be Jewish or against Jewish institutions. So what do we do about it? At the ADL, we're working tirelessly to establish state legislation, to work with Congress at the federal, state, and local level so that we can tirelessly combat the threats we see today. Earlier this week, the ADL announced an advocacy framework to fight the scourge of anti-Semitism, and we'll be working with state houses and representatives across Congress to do that. And let me just make one note about this event that brings us here today. This is the beginning of a very important move forward toward education, not only for the Jewish community, but for all people in Grand Rapids, as well as thousands of visitors who come here annually. I'm very happy to say that ADL team members worked with Nicole's team to ensure that this sculpture could open up a massive treasure trove on the QR code when you scan it, the details of Henry's experience in this community, the history, and most importantly, to remember and to never forget the menace of anti-Semitism, but also how to respond to it. I could talk for a long time about ADL and the Jewish Federation's commitment to eradicating anti-Semitism, but I know you want to hear from the artist, Ariel Schlesinger, and so I will close with this point. Tonight is not the end of this discussion. It's only the beginning. I'd like to ask members of the ADL team who are here today to show their presence. If you wouldn't mind, just stand up, please. Staff, board members, our young leadership class leaders, please stand, wave so folks know who you are. This is going to be part of the conversation that goes on still tonight in the events that follow. I urge everyone to have conversation with our team here tonight, how we can get involved and how we can work to empower communities across the state of Michigan, and most importantly, how to get involved. I know we can make a difference through education, with support, and with the fellowship of one another. Stephen, thank you for this opportunity.
As said, next the artist, Ariel Schlesinger.
Thank you. I'll just start by saying it's a great honor, and I want to thank the family, the gardens, the Jewish Federation, and everybody who really, all the people that made the effort to make this happen. So I'm a very small part of it. How is it possible to relate to concrete horror through artistic representation? How art can restore and produce collective recognition and resolution. Part of the burden of remembering a violent erasure often rests on the artist's shoulder. Maybe even the most impossible task, which is acknowledge traumas, grief and losses in a form of public remembrance. But we all know it is impossible to pour all this into a sculptural form. Any artistic act could obscure and distance us from the real, because memories and traumas are a huge mosaic of fragments and life stories of people during, before, and after any form of violence. Moreover, if we refer to past collective traumas, the memory is not preserved as a uniform picture over the generations, but changes along time. It manifests differently, and it has its specific journeys, different places around the world. There are many ways to remember, acknowledge, and feel. And often these are deep-rooted memories of the trauma that travels from first to second and third generations. I am an inheritor of trauma. My grandparents survived the Holocaust, but not so their parents and extended family. My trauma from the Holocaust as a third generation is therefore an indirect trauma built on the memories that my parents and family have maintained alive by my upbringing and the context by which I grew up with. Precisely because I have no lived memories of it, my experience stems from and is shaped by stories, imagination, and creation. I look back, I look up at the sky, I see fragments of images, smoke boiling over kilns of death. Maybe upward gaze is directed to redemption, or all that it is not material, to the mood of a dream, hope. Well, this is not an act of representation, but rather recognitions of wounds, of an important aspect of our beings. To celebrate humans' resilience even after catastrophe. Here, people will come, look at, survey this tree. The images reflected in the viewer's eyes will also include skies, clouds, the trees around. Everyone sees what their heart and soul see. With our past, imagining a better future for all. Thank you.
Nathan Pesca, who is my son and my wife Alicia's son and the grandson of Henry Pesca.
Sorry, I'm moving, so I don't have a printer currently. The great Primo Levi once said, "There is Auschwitz, so there cannot be God." This is a statement that on paper, a man that endured what he did, what my own family and grandfather did, both make sense, and to me, is paradoxical. Today I stand before you a person that any official from Ahavas Israel could tell you that my attendance record at Minyan services, Shabbos services, would not make for a respectful batting average. Frankly, it makes my collegiate attendance record look great, which wasn't anything to write home about either. But there's a reason today and every other day the Star of David around my neck remains. It's not because I've sworn off unleavened bread, cheeseburgers, and I can assure you I know the taste of bacon and lobster. But it is because I deeply and wholeheartedly disagree with Primo Levi. Human beings have the capacity to harm ourselves and others to an extent no other living thing does. We've seen this day in and day out, especially in this country, in which unimaginable cruelty dominates our news cycle, and what we are able to do to one another seemingly becomes more and more incomprehensible. But this is not the death or lack of existence of God, and this is where my disagreement with Mr. Levi could not be more fervent. Close to my age, my grandfather was housed in the most prolific killing machine the world has ever seen. In less than 4 years at Auschwitz, upwards of 4 million people, most of which were Jews, were gassed, shot, burned, and starved to death. Countless more died from disease and the cold. A liberator of Auschwitz described it as a portrait of the living dead, skeletons clinging to life. That was where he was. A steadfast reminder my issues with traffic and gas prices couldn't be more inconsequential. A reassurance of what real suffering is. Today, the World Health Organization contends there are 4 ongoing genocides globally. While the Holocaust is personal to us and a monument of history, when we say never again, we've already failed. Tonight, however, what we are doing is integral to making those words mean what they were meant to. We must never forget what humanity is capable of, what happens when we abandon the rule of law, when we scapegoat a group of people that is easy to target, and when humanity simply turns on itself. I told this story almost a decade ago when my grandfather passed away in early 2013. I was 21 years old, a political science student at the University of Michigan, and I was granted an independent study credit to work for my father as he ran for the seat that Representative Meyer proudly serves today. I had my Pesca t-shirt on. Anyone that encountered me at that time knows how pestering I truly was. But I'll never forget one night out of the countless I'd spent annoying people at their front door asking for yard signs, donations, even a volunteer hour, when someone said to me, if your father was 10% the man your grandfather was, he'd have my vote 7 days a week. Now, at the time, this was a little bit jarring. You know, I was used to someone telling me no thank you and have a good night. It's nice that you're representing your father and trying to help him, etc. This was a little more blunt than that. However, after the initial wow factor, I thought about it a little deeper. And I realized that being 10% of my grandfather and survivors like him is simply not a put down. Being 10% of a man that survived the most prolific death camp in human history, came to America with nothing and created a life like his is not an insult. Being 10% of a man that was honored in front of the United States Congress, a man that was so well respected that we have a United States Senator, Congressman, we have a video from Governor Whitmer paying their respect even almost a decade after his death, is not something to see as shame, but instead as an almost unobtainable goal. A standard that, with the life and opportunities I have been afforded, I see as both my responsibility and duty to pursue and uphold. So tonight, let us not take these unimaginable tragedies as a sign that God is dead, that God does not exist. Let us see the opposite. Let's instead see a grandfather that dedicated his life to us, his family, unlike any other. Let's remember a man that came through Ellis Island with pennies in his pocket and died the literal American dream. And let's remember how far as a species and as Americans we truly have to go. The great Elie Wiesel once said, I saw a father in Auschwitz give his son his bread. He was starving. His son refused to eat it, telling his father he needed it more. They sat together in the snow, embracing, eating the piece of bread, and at that moment I knew God was real. That story is my grandfather and survivors like him. That story is survival, and that story is our future. God is not dead. He's alive in people like Henry Pesca and those affected by the Holocaust that we, the younger generations, must never forget and always revere. Thank you all for coming tonight, my father and my aunt for their tremendous generosity, and for your support of this monumental illustration of how far we truly have come, but how far we really must go.
Thank you, Nate. At this time, Alyssa Vanderkooy and Stephanie Rubens, granddaughters of Henry Pesca and daughters of Linda Pesca.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Rubens, Henry's youngest granddaughter. I would like to thank everyone for being here tonight to honor my grandfather and the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust. My grandfather loved this city and the life he built here. I'm so grateful Frederick Meyer Gardens is hosting this magnificent sculpture. This sculpture will be an important part of educating the community and keeping Holocaust survivor stories alive. I would like to introduce my sister, Alyssa Vanderkooy, who will be sharing some of our grandfather's story. Thank you. Being Jewish is more than practicing a religion. It's our traditions, our values, and our history. For those of us who have spent time in a synagogue or a temple, we've heard the Hebrew words lador vador. In English, this means from generation to generation. We have a responsibility as Jews to our ancestors and also to future generations to pass down these things that make us Jewish. While lador vador often encompasses celebratory events like a bris or baby naming of an infant, the breaking of a glass at a wedding or a bar or bat mitzvah, it also encompasses the tragic parts of our history like the Holocaust. I distinctly remember the first time my mom told me about the Holocaust. I was about 7 years old. It was during that same conversation I learned that my grandfather was a survivor of the Holocaust, the sole survivor of his family. Both of his parents and 3 siblings all perished. I also learned that my grandfather had spent time in concentration camps, including one called Auschwitz. None of this made sense in the picturesque suburban world that I had become accustomed to growing up in Grand Rapids. Learning that this type of evil exists in the world changes the view of how a child sees things. Everything is a little darker, a little less trustworthy, and you walk through life a little bit more on edge, especially when you know that your family members were victims of such atrocities. But as difficult as it was for my mom to share her father's tragic story with me, it was necessary. As we all know, history, the good and the bad, has a way of repeating itself. And it is our responsibility, not just as Jews, but as a society, to educate ourselves about the bad in order to prevent it from being repeated or denied. The most defining part of my grandfather's history was his unlikely survival of the Holocaust, but it's the thing he spoke about the least. Growing up, it was a very rare occasion that he would speak of his past. During these rare occasions, my ears would perk up, hoping to soak in a piece of his history to help put together the puzzle of who he was. And on that rare occasion that he would speak of this dark period of his life, his focus was never on the darkness, but always on the light. I recall him telling me about being a prisoner at Auschwitz. He was given a job there to be a painter, which helped him to stay alive while so many around him were killed. Along with the Nazi guard, he would take regular trips to a store to pick up paint. Each time my grandfather entered the store, a woman who worked there would ask if she could give the prisoner a piece of bread. Depending on who the guard was, sometimes they would allow this and other times they would not. Receiving an occasional extra piece of bread was extremely important to him as he was just barely surviving each day. But one day, when he went into the store, the woman asked the guard if she could give the prisoner a piece of bread, and the guard threatened to kill her. From that day forward, the woman and my grandfather created a secret language. Every time he came into the store, he would make a gesture based on the guard accompanying him that would signal to the woman if it was safe for her to offer him a piece of bread or not. This memory that my grandfather chose to share with me was one of the kindness of a stranger during the darkest of times. His ability to see the light through the darkness is something that we pass on from generation to generation, lador vador. After surviving the Holocaust, my grandfather spent a short period of time in Paris before joining his only living relatives, his aunt and uncle, who had moved to New York City before the war. He was from a small town in Poland and quickly learned that the big city was not for him. But he didn't have a home anymore, and going back to Poland was not an option. When my grandfather was growing up in Poland, he was responsible for taking the mail to and from the post office for his family. His father had a friend named Sam Wiseman, who had moved from Poland to America before the war and ended up here in Grand Rapids. My great-grandfather and Sam stayed in touch as people did back then by writing letters. During those trips to the post office, my grandfather memorized Sam's address. So, after spending some time in New York City, my grandfather wrote a letter to the address in Grand Rapids that he had seen so many times before as a child, explaining that he was the sole survivor of his family and asking if there was any work for him in Grand Rapids. Having assumed the demise of the entire family, Sam was overjoyed to learn of my grandfather's survival and assured him that he could make a living in Grand Rapids. So my grandpa moved to Grand Rapids, where he found work, initially at a gas station, and where he found a pseudo-family, which became a real family, as he married Sam's niece, Beatrice, my grandmother. Upon moving to Grand Rapids, the Grand Rapids Press wrote an article about him, a Holocaust survivor living amongst the community. He told me that after the article was written, people would recognize him on the street and shake his hand. He felt embraced by the people here and found the sense of community he so desired. When he would speak of this period of his life, he never spoke of the hardship of learning a new language or being an outsider. Instead, he always spoke of the warm embrace that he received from his community and the opportunities made available to him. His perseverance to start over here in Grand Rapids is something we pass on from generation to generation. L'adore vador. So while we honor my grandfather's positive outlook on life despite living through the worst of times and his perseverance, we also remember the atrocities that were committed upon him, his family, and the 6 million Jews and 5 million non-Jews that were murdered during the Holocaust. My grandfather passed away in 2013 at the age of 93. There are very few survivors left today. So it is our duty as the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of survivors to tell their stories. Just like my mom shared my grandfather's past with me when I was young, in anticipation of tonight, I recently shared my grandfather's past with my eldest child, my son, who is named Henry, and is with us here tonight, along with my daughters, Ella and Goldie, and my sister's children, Ben and Mila. And l'adore vador, from generation to generation, we will continue to tell the stories of survivors who are no longer able to do so, not only to honor their survival, but to prevent this terrible part of our history from being repeated or denied. The Grand Rapids community gave so much to my grandfather. It gave him a new start, opportunity, and a sense of community and belonging. So it only makes sense for us to honor him here, to honor his life and the lives of 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust. And this powerful sculpture created by the talented Ariel Schlesinger and graciously housed by the beautiful Meyer Gardens is the perfect way for us to share a difficult piece of history with future generations. As I said when I started speaking tonight, as Jews, we have a responsibility to pass down our religion, traditions, values, and history, the good and the bad, the celebratory and the painful, from generation to generation. L'adore vador. Thank you all for being a part of this tradition with us.
Steve, Linda, I invite you and your entire family to come forward to cut the ribbon. And we have a bunch of scissors.
I think that you might have to.
No running.
There you go.
Everybody want? Well done.
Ribbon cuttings, evidently.
Yeah. Thank you. Cantor Rachel will now have a blessing for us.
Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, our God and God of our mothers and fathers, may the power of this beautiful work of art leave its mark on this community. May Meyer Gardens and Grand Rapids become a destination for Holocaust education and healing. And may the memory of Henry Pestka, of the 6 million, and of all Holocaust survivors be for blessing. May the Jewish people be like this tree, ever strong, ever present throughout all the generations. May we know that although there may be shards of glass threatening to embed themselves into us in the form of anti-Semitism and hatred, or even in the loss of our religious freedoms, we have endured through worse. Let the pain of our memories and the love of those lost spur us to educate and inspire, to mourn and to hope, and to do all that we can to ensure the veracity of our words when we say, never again. Amen.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the trams will begin running shortly to take everybody back to the main building. If you choose to walk, just sort of see the building in the distance and head that way. Thank you again for coming, and to Pesca's, thank you so much for making it possible.